Welcome to a new group of mini-series I'm going to be starting on the Scrooge channel. We're going to call it Mods Manual, and today, this first mini-series, we'll be looking at RemoteTech. Now, RemoteTech was one of the most challenging mods I started at first, but once I got used to it, it's actually a pretty cool mod, and I think it makes KSP more difficult, but also more fun at the same time, because you actually have to think about some of, especially for probes, you have to think about where you're going and when you want to go, and it makes missions a little bit more complicated sometimes, but in a good way. So this first episode, we're going to show you how to set up a just a basic communications network around Kerbin, so that no matter where you go, you will always have a connection back to the KSC. So I'm going to start with a little introduction on the beginning arrays you have, and then we'll go from there. So let's take a look at the tech tree and see where we need to be before we can start our adventure setting up this satellite constellation around Kerbin to ensure connection all the time back to the motherland. So I would recommend going for electrics. It gives you this omnidirectional antenna, and then it gives you this Reflectron KR7, which is pretty good for how early you get it in the tech tree. So I guess I'll explain the difference between omnidirectional and directional. So there aren't many omnidirectional antennas. So there's this Comtech EXP guy. Let's see. Then there's your beginner. Reflectron is omnidirectional. And then you have your Communicatron 16, 16S, and Communicatron 32. Now those are going to be your only omnidirectional antenna, but once you have a decent network set up, you're not going to need omnidirectional really, except for I don't use them anymore after I get a network set up. I just bring the Reflectrons and these high gain antennas. Now, the only reason you do need an omnidirectional, and why I recommend either this DP10 or the Reflectron 16S, the one that fits on the side, is because initially your omnidirectional, or your directional antennas are not going to be activated. So most of them need to be deployed. These dishes don't need to be deployed, they just need to be activated, but they do require quite a bit of electric charge. As you can see here, this one's 0.82 per second. So ideally, while you're launching, you're not going to have a directional satellite or a directional antenna on. So you'll use your omnidirectional ones for the launch, and then when you get to space and get into your orbit is when you start activating these directional satellites, or antenna, sorry, and those will give you connection throughout the duration of your mission, provided you have a good backbone, which is what we're going to set up in this episode. So yeah, well, let's get to it. Our workhorse for this is going to be the Reflectron KR7. Now, something I do want to point out is the dish range and cone angle. So cone angle 25 degrees is large but also small. If you're familiar with the mod, you might know that. Let's see. I don't know where higher level antennas are. Yeah, so here's a cone angle of 0.12. Some of them get all the way down to like 0.05, 0.01. Here's a 0.06. Those are going to be for interplanetary missions, which we'll get to in a couple episodes. But there is one antenna, or two, if I can find them real quick, I'll show you, that have 45-degree cone angles, which is really nice for these missions. But you want to get this set up as early as possible. So the KR7 is going to be your workhorse and your backbone for any Kerbin-oriented missions. So let's get to that. Okay, so we have the COM1, which will be just our beginner generic satellite that we're aiming to put out in space. So when I say put out in space, there are two options. Just to keep things simple, I usually prefer to go in a synchronous orbit around Kerbin, which I can put up the numbers, but it's about 2,860 something kilometers high. So synchronous orbit is you're going to have the same relative position on the ground on Kerbin while it's orbiting. So you won't, if one's looking at the KSC, that will never not be looking at the KSC. Similar train of thought, you can do semi-synchronous, which is about half that altitude that I just mentioned for synchronous, and either or works. And really, as long as these satellites are at the same altitude, just evenly spaced out from each other, they will work just fine. And I'll show you what I mean by that. So, COM 1, let's go over what we see. So, we have 4 of these Deflectron KR7s. The more the merrier, because you can always just not turn them on. But I prefer to have one that looks back at Kerbin. So this will be one of these. And then one that looks at its neighbor. So one looks to the left, one looks to the right of it. And then you have a spare just in case you need it. You can always go, say, years down the line, you need connection and you're like, oh, you panic, and you have an extra satellite or an extra radar dish there. It'll help you out. So I mentioned before about omnidirectional and directional, and you need directional at the beginning. So unlike base KSP, distances don't stack. So for this KR7, we have 90 millimeters, which is plenty for anything inside Kerbin's sphere of influence. But the directional one's not so much. So 1.5 million meters for this Communitron 16S, and since it's not base Kerbal, these ranges will not stack. So even though I have 2 down here, it's really just for looks. I'm gonna get 1.5. If I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 10, doesn't matter how many of these I have, I'll have 1.5 millimeters of range. Now, I like to have directional antennas on them too, even though they really don't do much. But this Comtech one is not active at launch. It has to be activated in the atmosphere, or outside the atmosphere, because yeah, try launching with that extended. It's going to snap almost immediately, and your life will be sad because you will lose connection, which is a common occurrence. Same goes for the regular Communitron 16. I'll just stick one on here. Sure. It won't snap like that, but it also doesn't have connection like that. So if you were to deploy your antenna and then try and launch with it deployed, it would snap and you would lose connection. That's why the 16S and the DP10, more the 16S, it's just a higher range DP10, are almost always necessary when you're talking about probes, because you need that initial connection to get it into space. Now, I won't be showing the launches because I'm hoping that everybody can launch themselves however way you want, as Kerbal as you would like. I noticed a problem here. I'm going to fix it. There we go. And then, since all these require a good bit of power, we have 6 of our basic photovoltaic panels that just are these guys. And then we also have battery packs kind of tucked in here, you know, all around, just to make sure that we have power while we are eclipsed by the Earth, or sorry, by Kerbin, and we're not collecting solar power from these photovoltaic panels. So I'll put these guys into their appropriate orbits, and we'll go from there. Alright, so we have our 3 satellites up in synchronous orbit. We'll just show you what's going on here. Deployed our solar panels, deployed our omnidirectional antenna. All of these active, and we're not losing electric charge. That's good. Now, these guys, doesn't matter where you face them. They don't have to be faced at their target, which is nice. And Yeah, so let's show you the network we set up. So there's A, B, C. So down here in the bottom right, it might be kind of hard to see, and maybe I can blow it up. But you have some buttons. So this first one, you click it, if it's not highlighted, it won't show you anything. Click it once, it shows you what your direct connection is. So say, here, let's do an example. So direct connection, so switch to B, and with direct connection, it'll show us bouncing to A, and then bouncing to the KSC. So that's direct connection. And then this shows all active connections. So you can see that A is connected to the KSC and is connected to C and is connected to B. Now, B and C do have a connection to each other, but since it's not necessary, they choose to not connect there. Because they always go to shortest hops to get back to their mission control. So the maximum amount of hops either B or C would have is 2, so 1 to A, 1 to the KSC. If B talked to C, it would go B to C, which is 1, to A, 2, back to the KSC, which is 3. So technically it takes longer. Yeah, so like I said, it doesn't matter which way they're faced. Let me activate this, I forgot. They can face wherever they want. Whichever gives you the most coverage on your solar panels is the way I recommend you face. So I could really flip this around, but it doesn't matter because this one also is not losing electric charge. If you're strapped for electric charge, you can deactivate these guys now that were just used for launch. They don't use much energy, I mean like 0.02 per second, so deactivating them really doesn't do much, but it can help in the long run if you're running low on electric charge. Because compared to these guys, they use like not even a 100th, I think. I don't know. Maybe, yeah, like whatever. I'm not gonna try and do the math. You can do the math on your own time. Anyway, so we'll show. So one guy's looking at comm 1A. This guy's looking back at Kerbin. This guy's looking at comm 1C, and this one will say it's looking at comm 1B, which is this craft. In this menu right here is where you select what you want it to look at. And I have it set to active vessel, so no matter what vessel you're in, if you're flying, you know, way out there, this active vessel one will be looking at you. So that can save you from having to go into here and select what you're actively flying every time and communicate back and forth between the two. So active, it's always good to have one set on active vessel. Another cool thing about this mod is it shows you the distances between planets and the antenna range. So this antenna range is 90 million meters, which is nowhere near close enough to get to Moho, as expected, which is about 14.5 gigameters. I mean, it shows you, but it's definitely enough to get to the moon and to Minmus. So these are great little antennas for, you know, just hopping around from moon to moon, or, you know, putting up a space station in the Kerbin orbit, or whatever you need to do. There's lots of missions to do around Kerbin. And you have pretty much full coverage. Let's go show the coverage now. So I showed you the first one. So let's close it so it doesn't get confusing. The second one is this. It shows the cones of all your antenna. So, which is also kind of confusing. There's lots of lines going on. But you can see there's one cone going to C right over here. There's one cone going to B. It's right in the middle. And then there's a cone that's going to the Kerbal, or to Kerbin. Now, 25 degrees is just big enough so that when you're in a synchronous orbit, which is about 2,863 kilometers, like I said, a 25 degree cone will cover the entire planet. So you don't have to worry about missing any coverage on the planet now. The one thing that you can add is a satellite in polar orbit of Kerbin. If you ever come across a situation where you need it, it'd be good to have. But other than that, this is going to cover every single thing you will need around Kerbin. This button right here shows all your connections. So like I said, there is that connection from B to C. It's just not used. And this last button is pretty cool. So if you click on it, it shows all of the active antenna that are on that craft. And this little small white satellite button up here is associated with the RemoteTech mod. So without switching to the target, so say I'm trying to go to Duna, I don't have to switch back to a satellite. I can come here, click on COM1A. It focuses the view. And down here, see this yellow button, it switched to COM1A. So I can say, hey, I'm going to Duna, so maybe I need to come in here and target Duna, which you can do. And it switches it for you without having to switch vessels, which can be really nice. So yeah, you just click off it to close it and click off here. You can also do the same thing with anything you have, which is pretty nice. But you're still locked in to COM1B. So if you like this little explanation, let me know. There's definitely going to be more coming. I think next we're going to focus on building a interplanetary communication network right here at Kerbin. So that'll be nice. You don't have to worry. Well, we'll do a snapshot at building one around the moon or on Minimus. It's the same thing. Same thing as this guy. You put him in synchronous orbit around the moon and Minimus, and voila, you're done. So let's show you that. Okay, so we have our synchronous orbits set up around Kerbin, the moon, and Minimus. They're all, I'll link the Wikipedia page where it has the list of all the altitudes you need to be for synchronous orbits. And then yeah, it's pretty basic to get to these orbits. They're really nothing fancy. Chances are they're not going to be perfect, so over time the satellites might drift towards or away from each other, which is okay. It's okay. The more satellites you put out there that have antennae, the more coverage you're going to have, and so on and so on. Right now, I would say you have like 98% coverage at the moon and Minimus. Let's see. The poles still might be your problem. So if you want to do polar missions, I would recommend putting at least one satellite in some sort of orbit, in a polar orbit around the moon. Maybe a couple if you want to. And occasionally you might get eclipsed by the sun and lose power, or there's just a couple things that could happen. So like we lost signal right there for some reason. So just a little bit of signal loss. And I mean, just warped a lot, so only lost signal for like a little tiny bit. Let's check out Minimus. Yeah, synchronous orbit is very slow around Minimus. Yeah, so I don't think Minimus is losing any connection whatsoever, which is nice. So this basic setup right here, which is really about as basic as it gets, will allow you to get, countless amounts of science from both the moon and Minimus and Kerbin. Since you're pretty much always connected, we haven't lost signal yet out of Minimus, which is nice. Whoa, wrong way. Anyway, if you enjoy this basic setup episode, tune in for next one where we'll set up our interplanetary communication network out here at Kerbin. Yeah. So if you haven't noticed the we're not going to talk about flight computer yet. If you haven't noticed the delay up here, it's so small that it doesn't matter while you're in Kerbin orbit. That's why I haven't talked about it yet. When it becomes a factor, I'll talk about it more, and there's definite ways to get around it. So don't be daunted by this signal delay. It's still very easy to land on Minimus with the 0.15 second signal delay. Very easy, especially since Minimus is so easy to land on. So if signal delay is a huge turnoff for you as far as RemoteTech goes, and you want to turn off signal delay, I recommend you stick with it. There's clever ways of getting around it, and some of them are actually pretty exciting, which we'll talk about in the future. So if you enjoyed this this episode, which might be kind of a long one of the longer ones. Getting this basic setup done. Then drop a like, comment, subscribe. Let me know if you have any questions. Feel free to comment the questions, and I'll get back to you pretty soon. I'm always checking. And yeah, this synchronous 3-satellite synchronous setup works anywhere you want, any planet, any moon, the sun, although you usually are not trying to land on the sun. So yeah, give it a try. Hopefully I'll influence you to like RemoteTech a little bit more. Thanks for tuning in. Adios.